Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in this video I'm going to take you through 11 dishonest debating tactics. So all of these tactics are employed by people who are essentially not interested in truth, but interested in power, using power to uphold a particular narrative, dogma, piece of propaganda or what have you, and to make it look like they're debating, whereas in fact they're kind of leading you off the trail. And some of them are kind of obvious to spot, and some of them are actually very difficult to spot. So I'm going to go through them. Just a couple of bits to give some preface before I go through them. So there are basically two orientations that any of us can make. Okay, one is when you look within your own ego essentially, and find truth from what you already know, and then the world becomes a power game, and then you're interested in using things like dishonest debating tactics if you like that. The other way is you look to the self, the Jungian self, you look outside of yourself to the unknown for truth, and then that's when you want to use honest debating tactics to wrestle towards truth, which is inherently unknown. But both people in both camps, both the liars and the truth seekers, are both saying that they're seeking truth. So that's the confusing thing. And these 11 things that I'm going to point out will actually help you discern which person you're talking to, someone from Team Truth or someone from Team Lies. And then once you've identified like who you're talking to, like you then know how to debate them. There's a way to debate a person who like you is struggling for truth. And there's a way to debate someone who isn't interested in truth and instead is interested in upholding a dogma. You can either choose to, clash swords with them to sharpen your skills, which is sometimes interesting, or more often than not, it's just walk away and understand that they're not oriented to truth, they're oriented to power, and just leave them to it. So without further ado, let's get on with this. So the first one we're going to look at is the ad hominem argument. Ad hominem, and I think it means it's Latin for to the person, or something like that. So the way an ad hominem argument works is that you, instead of tackling the logic and facts that you are bringing head on, or your opponent's bringing head on, what you do is sidestep those logics and those facts and logic, and instead attack the person. So the common one that we get a lot in 2020, 2021 is, you're a conspiracy theorist, or you're not a conspiracy theorist, are you? And maybe you are a conspiracy theorist, maybe you're not. But notice now we're talking about your sensibilities as a conspiracy theorist, rather than like the 3 or 4 bits of evidence and logic that you tie together as your argument. So you sidestep the argument, and now the opponent is feeling defensive about who they are as a person. I've got some demonstrations for a lot of these, so I'll show you this one here. So this is a real life example of an ad hominem attack. So this lady here was one of those Capitol Hill doctors, where she was talking about some of the problems with the scamdemic and how they've got some good cures for it, and how a lot of the data within it is fallacious. Now, you may agree or disagree with this particular lady, but you can sidestep her arguments by using an ad hominem attack. So they did it down here. There's a little bit here. There you go. So this lady's name is Emmanuel. Emmanuel, 55, claimed in a 2013 YouTube video that some medical conditions were caused by demons and witches having sex with human beings in their dreams. So most people are at least mostly materialist or mostly secular in the West, and so by digging up something that happened like 7 years ago, it paints her as a kind of a wacky person, and you get to attack her character and win the argument that way, whilst sidestepping all the points she made. And this argument from MSN obviously doesn't address the argument she makes and the evidence she makes. They explicitly sidestep those arguments and then attack her character as a way to appear as if you've won the argument when you haven't. So that's an ad hominem. So by the way, all of these strategies and tactics, what they're designed to do is sidestep the truth, sidestep the data and the logic, and then make it look as if you've argued against them, whilst diverting it to some other place. So all of these tactics I'm going to list have that in common. So that was the ad hominem argument. So the next one is gaslighting. So gaslighting, it's a term that comes actually from narcissistic abuse, which actually rings very true for a lot of this this deceptive arguing. And basically, it's a bunch of strategies and tactics used to make the person, the target, doubt their sense of reality, to doubt their capacity to think, to doubt the validity of their emotions. So that's gaslighting. So when narcissistic abusers gaslight their targets, for example, they might say, "Oh, you're very sensitive," or "You're prone to sensational thoughts," or they might look at them and say, "I don't know what you're talking about," and they actually do know what they're talking about, but what they're doing is making it seem like the target is incoherent, and actually they're saying crazy stuff that no one can really understand. One of the ways I see gaslighting done, actually, in modern days by your kind of mid-wit, half-intellectual type person, is they start to bring up the good old cognitive biases. So they'll say, you know, maybe you'll make an argument that that COVID-19 is overhyped, and our authoritarian response towards it is not only immoral, but is, you know, going to cause much more damage than COVID-19 is. And rather than tackling those points head on at the argument, they could say, well, you know, you got to be aware of cognitive biases, Richard. You know, and if they're slightly more than a midwit, they're a mid and a bit wit. They might be able to list some cognitive biases. They might say you're using a consistency heuristic there, or something like that. Which is fair enough. Consistency heuristics are real. Cognitive biases are real. But the way that you can use cognitive biases as a way to gaslight there is there's the implication that you, target, can't think clearly, you're the one with the cognitive biases, and by me, with my superior understanding of cognitive biases, labeling them, I show you that actually you as such, your thoughts, doesn't matter about your logic and your arguments and your data, you as such can't think clearly. And of course, the part of the fallacy of using the cognitive biases gaslighting technique is that they never turn it on themselves and go, well, I've got cognitive biases too, and maybe my cognitive biases might be stronger. So that's one of the ways you can deal with the cognitive biases variety of the gaslighting technique, is you can point out, well, what cognitive biases are you currently suffering from? And so actually, like, having a superior understanding of cognitive biases and then sort of like deploying that on other people is a power play to essentially shut down the arguments of the other without having to address them head on, and then to kind of give this idea that, like, look, something that I'm saying has more merit because I'm saying it, because I'm higher in this hierarchy of understanding cognitive biases, and equally something you're saying has an intrinsic demerit because you don't understand this cognitive bias. And the whole thing's a fucking scam. It's a misdirection, again, from the actual truth and the evidence and the argument and the logic, and it's a way to make truth a function of who's saying it rather than what the essence of the argument is. So I'll give you another an example of gaslighting here. Pandemic denial, why some people can't accept COVID-19 reality. So you see it's replete with gaslighting there. There's obviously the implicit assumption that they have access to reality, whereas people like me who deny it or are skeptical to it do not. With so much information about the severity of the coronavirus and the need to follow guidelines, some people still refuse to accept reality. So again, like the way that this journalist Meghan Marples of CNN frames this sentence here is one to say that the science is so old, it's a done argument, and actually it's their refusal of reality which is a problem here, which is classic gaslighting. So to make this clear, because all of these are very slippery, that Meghan Marples isn't looking at the arguments that people like me would make. She's not looking at our data and evidence. Instead, she's questioning our capacity to understand reality and accept it. And so the debate never takes place. And the target, that would be me in this case, or maybe you if you come from the same political aisle as I do, is given a feeling of being kind of like invalid intellectually and emotionally. So that's your That's your gas. I wonder if there's a bit more. The denial manifests itself in many ways, whether that being refusing to wear a mask or attending large gatherings. So you see their behaviour to go on protests or not wear a mask isn't based on science, evidence, or whatever. It's based on denial, which is which is something that Megan here understands and is a psychological kind of defense mechanism that she understands, and that people like me don't understand because of our essentially more feeble essence. Using denial as a coping mechanism is not always a bad choice. Short term, it gives someone the time to adjust to situation. So it's understandable that invalids like me might use denial, because you see, it's, she's explaining how generous she is with her gaslighting. When it becomes a long-term crutch and puts others in harm's way, it can be dangerous. She also lists, there's also a psychology term called rationalism, which people often confuse with denial. It's a defense mechanism where people try to justify unacceptable behavior. Yeah, so basically she's implying that she's got a superior understanding of psychology, and invalids like me essentially have weak thinking abilities, weak emotional management, poor understanding of our psyches, which is why we would think such silly things. Again, remember, Megan didn't grapple with the arguments. She just gaslit in this article here. So that's your gaslighting, to make the target feel emotionally, intellectually invalid. Okay, that's gaslighting. The next one is straw man arguing. Straw man arguing. So this is a very, very common one. So when you're debating with someone, one way you can appear as if you're winning when you're not tackling their arguments directly is take a very weak form of their arguments. So spin it a little bit and then argue against that straw man, not the real arguments that they're making or the strongest form of their arguments, but the weakest form. And then of course a straw man is always easy to beat. That's the point. And then when you beat the straw man, it gives the appearance that you've beaten your opponent's arguments. And again, remember, all these strategies and tactics, are they strategies? All these tactics are actually really, they're very slippery and they're very effective, which is why I've got to make this video to, so you can see through it. So I'll give you an example of a straw man argument. Again, it's so easy making a video on deceptive arguing techniques in 2021 because there's so many fucking examples of it in mainstream media. But I'll show you this next one. So we got Politics USA. Trump supporters are now claiming coronavirus doesn't exist and nobody has died from it. So there's a great spectrum of people, of beliefs from my side of the political aisle, right? But like, and a few people do in fact believe this, that COVID doesn't exist and no one's died from it. They're exceptionally rare, and it's an exceptionally weak form of the argument, of the arguments brought from my side. You might say a straw man of the arguments brought from our side. Supporters of Donald Trump are now claiming not only 0 people have died from the coronavirus, a dangerous lie, but that the virus itself doesn't even exist. So again, this journalist here, I don't even know what their name is. They're arguing. They've taken the most weak form of the the lockdown skeptic argument and then arguing against that, which is a deceptive form. What this journalist didn't do is take the arguments I might bring to bear and then use facts and logic and cogent arguing to debate against that, because if he or she knows that if they did that, it would be a really fucking difficult job. So they argue against straw men instead. So that's your straw man argument. So one way you can do it is, especially if someone's like kind of not fully on team lie, but like, most people are kind of in the middle somewhere, but if there's a part of them that actually genuinely is interested in truth, you might invite them to argue, to steel man your argument. Say, look, that's a straw man. See if you can make what do you think the strongest form of my argument is, and then how might you be able to argue against that? So that's a way you can deal with it and actually encourage truth orientation in your debating. There's actually one more example of straw manning that I've got here from the British Broadcasting Corporation, the fucking BBC, the Jimmy Savile hiding BBC, British state media. As you can tell, I'm not a fan of the BBC. I think they're fucking psychopaths. Coronavirus, scientists brand 5G claims as complete rubbish. Okay, so people are saying that like 5G weakens the immune systems and causes like radiation damage. Okay, so let's see how they strawman that. Conspiracy theories. So that's did you notice the ad hominem attack and the gaslighting there? Claim that 5G technology helps transmit coronavirus have been condemned by the scientific community. So what they're sort of leaning you to here. Is thinking that people like me believe that like the virus itself like is kind of transmitted along the radio waves, which is kind of, well, nearly no one. I don't think anyone actually thinks that, and yet they're kind of hinting that that's what people like me believe there, but through the use of a straw man argument. So that's another example of it. Okay, the next one is good old shame tactic. So one way that you can slip away from the truth and the logic and the arguments is by making the other feel a sense of defensiveness by casting shame on them. So one way that this is used in the COVID-19 scamdemic is they say, you don't care about all these dying people. So they've sidestepped whether you think that's true, what the data is, what the logic is, and instead they're making you seem like you're a sort of psychopath that doesn't care about people dying. I've heard actually before the scamdemic, an age-old lefty argument is like, well, I just care about the poor. And it's like, well, I care about the poor too, but we just disagree on how to fucking look after them, dick. So that's a shame tactic, because if I say, well, I care about the poor, it's implied that you don't care about the poor and you're a bad person, which understandably would make defensiveness and anger, which is the emotion of self-preservation, rise from that. A pro-EU argument that was and is used by the Ramonas a lot is, well, I just want Europeans to work together, or I care about Europe, I like Europe. It's like, yeah, I like Europe too. I just don't think giant super-states are fucking good, you know? And so again, like, there's this idea that someone like me, who doesn't like the European Union, is a sort of xenophobic, fucking knuckle-dragging bigot that doesn't like Europe and doesn't like Europe to work together. And you know, again, it's a shame tactic. Virtue signaling is a subcategory of shame tactic. So, you know, some of the not all mask wearers do this, but some mask wearers do that. And when they, you know, they sort of proudly show you their mask credentials and sort of like hide away because you're not keeping 6 feet away. Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they believe all this mainstream media stuff. Many of them actually just wish to create a feeling of shame in you as a power play. Vegans do it a lot. Some vegans, they're doing it for health reasons. Some of them are doing it because they care about animals. Many of them use it as a shame tactic to make like people that aren't vegans feel defensive about their inferior moral behavior. So just to reiterate this point, so shame tactics, like all form of covert aggression, elicit a feeling of defensiveness, and when you engage in that defensiveness and you try to justify yourself, you've already lost. So the actual solution to shame tactics is maybe point out that it's a shame tactic, and reaffirm to yourself that your belief that like your thoughts, your opinions, your emotions, your values are actually valid. And that will diffuse the shame tactic. Okay, this one is switching the topic, a red herring. So the idea with a red herring is to, again, all of these are used to dodge the thing, by the way. And the way the red herring dodges the argument is it throws a new, tantalizing argument out that makes you switch focus and then argue against this new thing instead of tidying up the old one. So I got this example of the red herring from Madsen Piry's book, How to Win Every Argument. The link to that is in the description. It's a really cool book that goes into a lot more of these dishonest debating tactics that I'm able to list here. But Madsen Piry says, the police should stop using environmental demonstrators for inconveniencing the police should stop environmental demonstrators from inconveniencing the general public. We pay our taxes. So that's the argument. And the use of the red herring here is, surely global meltdown is infinitely worse than a little inconvenience. So they've taken the red herring example there, takes you off the idea of whether the police should stop them or not, and instead argues on whether global warming is a big issue or not. So you've switched topics. And I've noticed that people that are good at women actually tend to be very good at using the red herring argument on the whole. You could flick between like 10 or 20 different arguments in the space of, you know, a short period of time, as the person in question throws another red herring and another red herring, and you got to remember that they're juicy, they're tantalizing, they're there to take you off the trail, and what you should be doing is saying, no, that's a red herring. Actually, we were originally talking about this thing, so let's tidy that up. Do we agree or do we disagree with this thing? And that's how you get away from the red herring. Okay, the next dishonest debating technique is moving the fucking goalpost. Moving the goalposts. Recently in American politics, there was essentially an election theft done, which is fucking crazy and will certainly be an interesting one for the history textbooks. The mainstream media famously went with, there is no evidence of election fraud. So if you were arguing against that, you might say, well, there's 1,500 affidavits, or however many there were. It was in the thousands. And then the person might choose to use moving the goalpost. So rather than addressing these affidavits, now you've brought your evidence forward, they might say, well, there's no video evidence. And now, you know, you almost feel compelled to try and find video evidence, and you've been had if you just start to think of that, because they've moved the goalpost. The initial point was, is there evidence? You've given evidence, and now they say, well, that sort of evidence is wrong. We want a different sort of evidence. Maybe if you gave them video evidence, they might say, no, but I need video evidence from a different source. And then if you give them from a different source, well, I need video evidence of a prime number or something like that. I mean, there's no end to how much you can switch the goalpost if you're particularly quick-witted and agile. Which, by the way, to give the devil its due, like a lot of these covert manipulators, like dogma, power-oriented people, really are quite quick-witted with this, and they've been doing this for many decades and are very polished in these dishonest debating tactics. A great example of moving the goalpost is the way the UK propaganda has continually changed during this scamdemic. So it started with 3 weeks to flatten the curve, and then it's protect the NHS, and then it's save lives, then it's stop the spread, and then it's deaths are up, and then it's cases are up. Polymerase chain reaction cases, by the way. Then it's get vaccinated, and then it's get a new strain, and then so on and so on and so on. And then, you know, the core issue is, why are you being like Joseph Fritzl and locking the UK up in the basements, you fucking weirdo? But they keep dodging this question, or dodging what they're actually doing, by continually moving the goalposts. So that's an example of that. Okay, another favourite of the scamdemic is dodgy statistics. So statistics, if used with in good faith and with an orientation towards truth, an orientation towards what you don't know, valuing that more than what you know, statistics can be a really useful tool for helping you discover the truth. But if you're oriented towards lies and dogma and power, they can be a great tool to kind of like bamboozle people, particularly people that just aren't educated in statistics, and make them believe that that something's true when it's really not. There's so many cases of this you can look into if you've got more time. But like, one of the things is they might say, well, coronavirus hospital admissions are up 50%, and that could be a true statement. But then you find out that last week the number was 2, and now it's 3, which technically is a 50% increase. But it's not very much, is it? You know, and it's very misleading, even though you've said something which is technically true. And that's an interesting nuance with all this stuff. Like, you're not telling a barefaced lie often, although sometimes they are doing barefaced lies. But often they're not. They're telling true statements in order to perception manage to an untrue end. So it still is lying, but it's a rather more sophisticated form of lying. But the end goal is the same, to bring your understanding away from truth, not towards truth. That's another thing that all of these crooked arguing techniques have in common. So they say, so one of the ones they used a lot is like, they say 100 new COVID cases and everyone's all shocked, and but then you look and they find out that they've done 50,000 more tests, and the PCR tests are actually notoriously unreliable. And when you see it in that context, 100 new cases out of 50,000 tests doesn't seem particularly worrying. So by changing the context with statistics like that, you can be thoroughly dishonest with your use of statistics. An interesting, fun little fact here is everyone's favourite psychopath, Bill Gates. I think this was taken like a year or two ago. He was talking about his favourite books, and right on the top of the pile there is How to Lie with Statistics. So one of the things that people like Gates that they're into is that they like to kind of rub it in your face a little bit. So that's what he's doing there. And you can, if you're oriented towards to lies, you certainly can use statistics to lie. Okay, next one is argument of authority. So the argument of authority is again dodging data and arguments, and instead suggesting that because of your high position in a hierarchy, what you say is true. So you might say, well, you can trust me because I'm a professor, or, well, actually I work for the NHS. So the idea is that because you work for the NHS, because you're a professor, because you're a mother, or whatever the authority that you're bringing to bear in the argument is, that somehow everything you have to say now should be taken with more merit. And this is fallacious because truth is truth. It's a product of arguments and data and logic. It is not a function of authority. That's quite rightly we badly criticise the medieval church for this fallacious use of argument authority. When a bishop or a cardinal says something, it must be true. And it's like, no, it doesn't matter whether it comes from a peasant or a cardinal or a king. If it's good evidence and good logic, the truth is the truth. But we seem to be bringing this argument of authority back with a vengeance. So the way you get around the argument of authority is you label it. You say, look, I don't believe that truth is a function of your position in a hierarchy. I think truth is about evidence and logic, so let's stick to the facts. And then that's how you can diffuse that particular one. The next crooked debating technique is non sequitur. So a non sequitur means, I think it's Latin again for does not follow or something like that. And what you can do is you can take a bunch of logic and then just make a conclusion that's got nothing to do with the original stuff. So I remember once I worked in a call centre. I was selling insurance. I was a young person, I was an idiot, and I took on a crooked job. And I called people up to try to sell them insurance. It's a shit fucking thing to do, but there you go, it was a mistake. Anyway, I didn't like to wear my shoes. And then the boss came along and says, you got to wear your shoes. I was like, why? And then she's like, well, health and safety. And I was like, go on, explain this. And she said, well, if there's a fire alarm, you need to be safe. And it's a complete non sequitur. Really, she just felt like she wanted to make me wear shoes for some particular psychological reason, right? But she didn't want to say that, or maybe she didn't think it out well enough. So instead, she gave me a non sequitur. Health and safety, therefore you got to wear your shoes. And sometimes they can be compelling, particularly if the non sequitur, for the reasons used for the non sequitur, are quite emotive. I could say, I want you to do this because of diversity or because of equality. And maybe it's got nothing to do with equality. Often, it's the case that maybe what you're suggesting actually is worse for equality and worse for diversity, or whatever the buzzword is. But it doesn't matter, because there was never an intention to tie your conclusion to the logical antecedents in the first place. And of course, the big one in 2021 is because of the pandemic. Why shouldn't I use cash? Because of the pandemic. Why should I stay at home? Because of the pandemic. And it doesn't necessarily follow that we should be locked in our basements because there's a pandemic going on. Okay, the next one is condemnation without examination. So this is when you feel like you don't need to examine your opponent's argument, and you could just condemn it and just out of hand. Galileo famously, so Galileo was a proponent of the heliocentric model, where he thought that actually the solar system went around the sun rather than everything going around the earth. And the Catholic Church had the idea at the time that everything went around the earth. And Galileo was like, so it got the cardinals round. He's like, look, just look in the fucking telescope, and I can show you this in like 2 minutes that I'm right. And the cardinals' response was like, don't need to, because what's the point? I already know it's wrong, which must have been really infuriating. But that's a good example of condemnation without examination. And people will often do that, with this. You might say, hey, I think we're being lied to by our governments, and I think this lockdown is really about authoritarianism and not about viruses. And then your opponent might say, well, that's just a conspiracy theory, and that's complete hogwash. So obviously that's gaslighting, and that's an ad hominem attack if they're bringing the conspiracy theory thing up. But it's also an example of condemnation without examination, because they're not examining your arguments, they're condemning it automatically. And the way you can deal with it, one of the ways you can deal with this is say, look, are you familiar with both arguments on both sides of this debate, and have you come to conclusion knowing both sides? And when you challenge your opponent to think like that, often their next response is, well, I'm not. Or they'd have to expose themselves as saying, well, I don't need to, or something, which makes the dishonest debater in a more difficult position, because again, remember, with dishonest debating, the whole ruse is that they're pretending that they're interested in truth, and they're using these little misdirections to make it look like they're chasing truth whilst maintaining this narrative that needs to be true. And if you expose these dishonest debating techniques for what they are, the ruse disappears, because it actually shows your opponent, if they're using these techniques, as someone who fundamentally isn't interested in truth, is just interested in maintaining a dogma because of reasons of power. I'm going to make more videos on actually the psychological substructure of why someone would want to chase power instead of truth, by the way, because there's actually they're bad reasons, but they're compelling reasons for a person to do that. So in future videos I'll explain that. Okay, and then the last dishonest debating technique is the barefaced lie, and this is really easy to understand. It's just, you just make a lie up, and you lie, and then you get what you want with lying. So one of the famous ones recently is the mainstream media saying there is no evidence of election rigging, and whether you agree that the election overall was rigged or not, to say that there is no evidence was a lie. It was a barefaced lie. There was mountains of affidavits and video evidence and statistical evidence and testimonies from experts and from software experts. So that was a barefaced lie. Recently, that lady, that senator or congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was lying about being in the Capitol building when it was raided by those couple of hundred protesters, when she wasn't. It was shown that she was in a different building, so that's a barefaced lie. A few years ago, when I was a younger person, George Bush and Tony Blair said, we've got to go into Iraq and do this horrible war because Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. And that was a lie. It was a barefaced lie. And when Boris Johnson said at the beginning of the lockdown and the scamdemic in the UK, he said 3 weeks to flatten the curve. That was a famous lie, and there was never an intention to do that. That was a barefaced lie. He was lying to you. Okay, before I finish, let's just look at this last article that I've got here, which is a New Scientist article. And I wanted to finish with this because it was a dishonest debating tactic medley, where they put, like, I don't know, we'll count them up, but there was a lot of these ones in there. Where is it? So that's the BBC. Okay. Conspiracy theories, so that's an ad hominem, gaslighting. Belief in conspiracy theories is the product of normal human psychology, but can be extremely dangerous. So this is gaslighting, when they're making people that think what I believe to look out to be like insane. Is COVID-19 caused by 5G phone network? So that's a straw man argument there, like which takes the weakest form of people saying that radiation weakens immune systems, or the product of a secret Chinese bioweapon program. Again, another straw man argument. No. So again, he's argued against two straw mans, and he looks really smart because he argued against them. There is no evidence that either of these claims are true. Well, that's a barefaced lie. as long as you don't go even the straw man arguments, actually there is evidence, so that's a barefaced lie. You might conclude that there's greater evidence on the other side, but to say there's no evidence is a barefaced lie. But to some people, the very lack of evidence is itself clear evidence of a cover-up. Welcome to the paranoid, topsy-turvy world of conspiracy theory. So again, that's gaslighting. He's making people think the political opinions that I think appear to be insane, which is what your good old narcissists tend to do. Think of any major world event, and there's almost certainly at least one conspiracy theory, gaslighting, to explain it. The list is almost endless. The Apollo moon landings were faked. 9/11 was an inside job. Fucking worse. Climate change is a hoax. JFK was assassinated by the CIA. The Earth is a flat. Again, that's a straw man argument. You're lumping people that think that COVID-19 is exaggerated in with people that think the Earth is a disc or something. The pharmaceutical industry is suppressing a cure for cancer. Vaccines cause autism. Princess Diana was murdered by the royal family. Barack Obama was born in Kenya and secretly a Muslim. The world is ruled by lizards. Many of these theories, the word is used in its colloquial sense rather than the strict scientific one. They should really be called conspiracy hypothesis, concern matters of science and medicine. So he's allying himself to the scientific tradition there, and in a very subtle way giving himself an argument of authority, because we are not scientific. He is scientific, therefore we can trust what people like him say more because he's coming from science. It is easy to dismiss conspiracy theories as unhinged beliefs held by a small number of paranoid idiots, so that's just gaslighting. But that seriously underestimates them. Belief in conspiracy theories is very widespread, the product of normal human psychology, and is extremely influential and dangerous, so this is a shame tactic. It's showing you that your thinking is not only mad, that's the gaslighting, but it shows you that actually you're dangerous and you're a bad person, which is a shame tactic. So, look, I could go on. I'm sure the rest of this argument continues as it starts, which is just one big dishonest broadside. But you get the idea. You can see that at no point does Graham Lawton, bring up the best forms of my argument and argue against them. Instead, he just uses a medley of dishonest debating tactics to make it appear like his position is true when he doesn't really use real debating. Alright, so a summary. And the reason I made this video, by the way, is this is a real fucking problem, because we're lying too much in our culture, and it's not just barefaced lies, it's actually using things like dodgy statistics and gaslighting and stuff like that. And it's causing a lot of chaos and destruction in our culture. So I hope this video actually helps us to orient ourselves to truth a little bit more by exposing the way the other side might use dishonest debating tactics. So the summary, I'm going to list them in the description, but the summary is: you've got the ad hominem argument, the gaslighting, the straw man, the shame tactic, the red herring, moving the goalposts, lying with statistics, argument with authority, non sequitur, condemnation without examination, and a barefaced lie. And that's 11 there. I think there are 11 of some of the most common ones, but there are many, many more, and I encourage you to learn them and know how to deal with them. And actually, the cool thing about this is once you really know these things, it's really easy to laser them down in an argument. You just label them, and it puts your opponent in a very weak position if they're exposed for using these. Okay, so that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you supporting my work. I really do value that, and I appreciate you doing your bit to orient yourself to truth. So if you want to support my work, there's 3 ways you can do it. Number 1, you can tip some library coins if you want. There's no obligation to do any of this stuff, but if you like to, you can. You can also click the affiliate link in the description and download the library app, which is what I use. And if you do that, I get paid 8 library tokens. Another thing you can do is you can check out my website, and if you value my life coaching, you can message me and hire me as your life coach if you wish. But as I say, no obligation to do any of this stuff. I'm happy to make this content for free and just put good ideas out there to make our society hopefully a little bit stronger. So thank you for watching, and I wish you all a great week and a slightly more truth-orientated psyche. Thanks for watching.